Joining me now, Patrice Lee Awuka, as Senior Policy Analyst at the Independent Women's Forum, and Christina Greer, Associate Professor of Political Science at Fordham University. Patrice, is this not going too far for the president to suggest that there's nothing wrong, whether it be legal or not, there's nothing wrong with taking information from a foreign power, even an adversary?
Well, I certainly think it's not a good idea, especially if the information could be dubious or from a source that's questionable, like a foe or a nation that wants to undermine what we're trying to do here in this country. But as you did rightly say, it's not. There's no legal mandate for a campaign to report any information they receive. It's a good idea, certainly, but there's nothing illegal about not doing it. I do think, though, that when we think about the 2016 election cycle, and we recognize that Russia has always tried to interfere in our elections. They did not successfully do so in 2016, but it is important that I think campaigns recognize, you know what, let me be careful about the opposition research that I know I'm already conducting and where it's coming from.
Well, there's evidence that they did use public media and other things, and that they may have influenced
But they
voters.
Did not change the results
we
of
don't
the
know
2016
that.
election cycle. No votes were changed.
We don't know that. Christina, if they used the social media and other forms with fraudulent claims, how do we know it didn't affect voters?
I think that is the crux of the Democratic frustration right now, that there is still this uncertainty and we have another presidential election looming. So I totally agree with Patrice that it is technically for the president to get information from a foreign power, the way he's sort of framing it right now, is not necessarily illegal, but we have certain norms in this country that this president has consistently broken. And that interview with George Stephanopoulos is reason 1080 why we know that his counsel would not allow him to sit down with Robert Mueller, because he cannot help himself. He's saying, well, it's like, hey, listen, if they interfere, I don't really see what the problem is, because his mobster mentality is such that if he can blur the lines of legality and if he can benefit himself, he doesn't fundamentally understand that weakens American democracy. And this is what the framers have warned us. And this is what essentially every president has had the decency, Democrat and Republican, to make sure that they didn't do in the past.
Let me take it a step further, though, Patrice. Wouldn't you, if you had a child that was going before a Senate subcommittee trying to say that they were not seeking information, and there are statements by people like Michael Cohen, their former attorney, that has given a different light on that, why would you suggest in public that it's all right to seek information from an adversary? I mean, doesn't he in some ways indirectly confirm that, in fact, they were open to do that?
Well, like the Hillary Clinton campaign, like many campaigns, people do conduct opposition research, and I think that's what
we're not talking about opposition. We're talking about an adversarial nation that is giving information directly against your opponent. We're not talking about opposition research you look up. We're talking about Russia that set up a meeting in Trump Towers to give information against his opponent, and he indirectly suggests there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, I think at the time, the campaign said, well, this is another source of information, someone reaching out to us with something. We do understand that there was no information that was ever shared. And so was that a mistake? I think that's for the campaign and for the administration to decide. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change, number one, it doesn't change the results of the 2016 election. And number two, I think it doesn't necessarily undermine this presidency. Was it a wise decision at the time? Probably not, and I think with hindsight they would say so. But looking forward, which I think is where we need to be going, we need to understand exactly how other outside nations may want to try and do this again, emboldened by what they saw in 2016.
Yeah, and I think you're right, which is why I think, Christina, we need to find out what happened in 2016. Is not helpful when the president is normalizing that, saying nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And in many ways suggesting what's the big deal.
Right. So I respectfully disagree with my fellow Tufts Jumbo. But this president has lied and cheated and stolen well before he got into the White House. And this administration has consistently lied to us. We know Sarah Huckabee Sanders did that before she stopped doing her job 85 days ago.
She's a warrior of truth, the president.
Is she now? And I'm on the NBA winning Raptors team. So I think I agree with Patrice in the sense that we do need to look forward, because 2020 is very dangerous. I think Putin is emboldened. I do think that they interfered in some way, whether it's social media, whether it's directly interfering with ballot boxes, because lots of states and counties don't have paper ballots anymore. I think that there are a myriad of ways that Russia and our other adversaries could have interfered, and we still don't know. And so moving forward, though, if we're thinking about 2020, the fact that Mitch McConnell and the Senate don't want to pass serious legislation that says this is actually, it will be illegal, and we will sort of prosecute people who try and interfere in our elections. A free and fair election society is what differentiates us from despots and dictators and, people who have zero democracies in their nations. So the fact that we have Congress, Republican congressmen abdicating their duties to protect us. We have a president who's like, I don't see what the problem is, because of his mobster mentality. And then we have courts who are now abdicating themselves to the president. Everyone is working for Donald Trump. This is beyond crisis mode, and we're seeing a fundamental breakdown in norms of American democracy, and we're realizing just how tenuous our American democratic system is.
Let me ask you, Patrice, what Christina just said. Should Mitch McConnell and the Senate and the Congress pass a law that you are required, if an adversarial or a foreign government, period, to give you information, you should immediately report it? Should that be a law?
I think it would be an interesting tool, certainly, to ensure that that campaigns don't receive nebulous information. There's a reason why I think Republicans chose not to pass that legislation that was introduced, and it would be interesting to know why. But
that's good, but not try to answer my question. Should it be a law? Yes or no?
I think it's up to Congress to decide.
Oh, but I'm asking you your opinion.
I think that it's important for Congress to protect our elections.
So it should be a law.
Whatever I think they determine would be the best way to do so. There may be other types of election law that's needed. Well, I would leave that up to the members of Congress to determine.
I mean, either you're going to have a law that says you should turn it around or not. I mean, you can't leave it up in the air. Laws are very specific. And I think that now this president has made this statement, Christina, wouldn't you think patriots would say, wait a minute, we need to have definitive law here?
Well, I mean, but we've seen...
All we need to say is all right for other countries to interfere. Well, I mean, one way or another.
Isn't that what we are saying right now?
Well, that's what Trump
the Senate's inaction is saying that.
Well, I'm just going to disagree and say there's a difference between receiving information, which could be different types of information, versus interfering. And I think there is a distinction to draw there. And if a campaign decides that it wants to receive information, and by the way, this happens on the Democratic side as it does on the Republican side, then that's very different.
Well, if it's a law, it would go for both sides. I'm saying if you get a call, as we are told, that I'm going to give you some dirt on your opponent, should there be a law to say you are required, since it's coming from a foreign source, that you've been notified?
You know why? Because this is what George Washington told us that we should be worried about in 1796 in his farewell address. Rev, we've talked about this on the show several times. It is one thing for from California to have a little dirt on someone who's the governor of Colorado or a senator from, New Mexico. It is fundamentally different if Russia or Iran or Saudi Arabia or the Philippines, you see where I'm going with the types of countries, then say, actually, I have dirt.
Well, you should at least question what is their motive.
Exactly.
I'm going to hold it right there. Thank you, Patrice and Christina. Coming up,